Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. This is Mrs. Dunlap. This is your chapters 1 and 2 chat with this cool cat, Mrs. Dunlap. I know this is so corny, but I thought I would try to make you smile. And on the cat note, I just watched the whole Tiger King documentary on Netflix, and wow, just wow. So, anywho, I thought I'd make you smile because I'm sure everybody's watching that documentary on Netflix right now. So, this is going to be your chapters 1 and 2 review. And I'd like you to make sure you have your book in front of you as well as your chapters 1 and 2 study guide. So, if you can pull that up on your phone or if you're at a computer, even better. So, we're going to go over a couple things. And as always, feel free to email me or set up a time to do a conversation one-on-one in my office hours, which I'll be telling you about. Anything that you need help with, I'm here to help. So, first thing I want to talk to you about is Gatsby's Hard. It is a tough read. It's an amazing read if you can comprehend and understand all the intricacies of Fitzgerald. So, I want to start talking a little bit about if you're struggling, how you can get help visually. And of course, this is not an alternative for reading because you're going to be assessed over the book with your study guides and your quizzes. But there are several films. There, I think, are about 3 or 4. The best film, if you can see here, is the 2013 version with Leonardo DiCaprio. You can rent it on any of these platforms here: YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Prime. So if you are really struggling, I would rent this. If you can afford it, buy it, and that way you can watch it over and over if you need to, or watch it a chapter at a time so you can see how everything flows and put a face to a name. But for now, I'm going to do my best to help you understand this classic American novel, the American novel, as people say. So, we're going to start with chapter 1, and I hope Elizabeth doesn't mind, but I'm going to use her study guide just because her answers were awesome. And we're going to just go over some things that you left me on your ticket to here, some of the questions you had, and so forth. Okay. So I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between these visuals here for you. So the biggest thing with chapter 1 is we have Nick narrating, Nick Carraway, who here, he's kind of like our wallflower, very quiet. He's in his late 20s. If we go back to your study guide here, which I went over a lot of this with you, the second half you had to do on your own here. You needed to make sure that you understood that Nick comes from an upper middle class background. His dad gives him some good advice about being a good listener, not judging people, and not comparing because he had a better upbringing than most people. So, a couple of your answers were a little off here about him being of lower class or poor. No. If you look at Nick, he's dressed well, he has enough money to move out to New York City and go into the bond business. So he is from an upper middle class background, and feel free, if you get this already, you can fast forward a little bit in this review. Okay. His family comes from a chain of hardware stores, so upper middle class, hardworking family. Okay. Nick does go into the war, World War One, and when he comes back, he decides to go uh, east to New York City to learn the bond business. Think Wall Street, stocks, financial opportunity there, financial career. So number 4 is where you all really struggled with this one, the different land masses of where people live. So I'm going to jump over here. West Egg and East Egg are these two land masses off of Long Island, off of the island that's connected with New York City. It's not in the city, it's away from the city, and you're going to find out, or you should have found out in chapter 2, that if you live on either of these eggs, you have to take the train through the Valley of Ashes to get into the city. So, what I want you to remember, okay, think about that first PowerPoint that you watched. West Egg and East Egg are equally wealthy, okay? However, it's how they got their money that's different. West Eggers, new money, 15 minutes of fame, Hollywood. They're in the entertainment industry, actors, dancers, singers, all of that. Very flashy. They're in film, okay? They don't have the classy upbringing as the East Eggers do in the old money. They are West Egg is less ritzy. So I want you to think when you think of people from East Egg, these are four generations of wealth, the railroad industry, the banks, the museums, the steel tycoons, the oil and gas, charcoal, coal mine, all of that. Okay. So there is quite a difference. And the East Eggers believe that they are better because they come from generational wealth. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that there. Nick tells us that Tom Buchanan, which is his cousin Daisy's husband, they went to school at Yale together. So when you see New Haven on the map, New Haven, Connecticut is where Yale University is, okay? Prestigious, one of the oldest schools in the country, private. So he probably got in there because he could afford it, not because he's smart. Okay, sorry. He's like the typical dumb jock, all right? He has money coming out the wazoo. He was a football star, very wealthy. When we meet Daisy, his wife, she's very innocent and um, fresh and pristine, and the color that we want to think of is white. A lot of you said yellow, good, blue, maybe. I got some interesting colors, but she's dressed in white. Her living room is white. Her name is a white flower. She speaks so eloquently. Okay, it's like the sense of white innocence. Okay. Then they're all having dinner in chapter one, and we find out the telephone rings when the Buchanans and Nick and Jordan, here she is right here, Jordan Baker, single woman. She's our classic flapper, short hair, high skirt. She's a professional golfer, um, equally wealthy as well. The phone rings and Tom excuses himself, and it is this hussy on the other line, or on the line, and Myrtle, Tom's mistress, has the nerve to call him in the middle of dinner time, in his residence where Tom lives with Daisy, his wife, okay, of 5 years, and they have a child together. So we immediately start to hate Tom, okay, because he's having an affair with a woman who lives in the Valley of Ashes. Daisy knows about it. She tells Nick about it indirectly when they're talking alone in chapter one. And Jordan is Daisy's best friend, but she loves to see Daisy in pain, and she it's almost like a high for her to uh eavesdrop on the gossip and what's going on with the affair. Okay, that's like no friend at all, right? So we know that Jordan Baker loves gossip and to eavesdrop and takes pleasure in Daisy's pain. Okay. So at the dinner table, when they're making small talk, Tom talks about this book he's reading called The Rise of the Colored Empires, meaning black people, black masses of people. Okay, think about this. This was the time of the Harlem Renaissance, where African Americans were being pushed into the cities and living in their own environments and communities, and they were coming together to advocate for themselves. And he basically says that this book is about black people taking over the whites. That's so racist, okay? And we should be troubled by his comments about this book. So when Daisy and Nick sit together out on her patio and they talk alone, she's manic. She's up, she's down, she's trying to laugh, she's making jokes out of things, then she's taking on a more serious tone. And she tells Nick that she's not happy. Well, no duh. Her husband is cheating on her and she's had a rough 5 years and now they have a child together. She can't quite leave. This isn't 2020, okay? So Daisy's a mess. Jordan Baker, I just talked about, professional golfer. She's our modern flapper. And Nick's heard some unflattering things about her cheating in golf, moving her ball in a tournament, also that she's dishonest and careless. Okay. So at the end of this chapter, I love this. Nick goes home after dinner and he sees this man, his neighbor, who lives in this colossal mansion next to him. So if you're thinking about West Egg, we got Nick's little tiny house here, and then Gatsby's colossal mansion that he's standing on his dock right here, stretching his arm across the bay to this green light, which so happens to be on the end of the Buchanan's dock. So, what does this mean, folks? Why is he trembling? We don't quite know. Nick doesn't want to interrupt him. He doesn't look like he wants to be bothered, but it's a weird moment to see this man reaching for this dock, and the green light on the dock symbolizes, you'll find out later, it symbolizes this quest for uh, Gatsby's dream. And I don't want to hint at too much, but if he's reaching towards the Buchanan's house, what could he want? Does he want the girl? Does he want what they symbolize, what they have, their wealth, their class, their status? Think about that, okay? And I wanted you to think about, what does green mean? What does this green light symbolize? Reaching for something. Green usually means good luck. It could mean money, wealth, envy. Think about that, okay? Moving on to chapter 2. Totally different chapter here. Opens up with the Valley of Ashes. I'm going to pull up the study guide here. I should have it somewhere. Okay, here it is. Chapter 2. I hope you can see it here. All right. Opens up with the description of the Valley of Ashes. Okay, so between the city and the country, and the city and, yeah, kind of like the suburb, the outskirts of New York City, where all of our characters live, you have to take a train through the Valley of Ashes. It's like this industrial wasteland, okay? So kind of imagine sometimes when you've seen going through cities, you've got an industry, it's very gray. When I go to Cleveland, I think like smokestacks when I see all the industry outside of the city. That's what you need to picture. And the color, we've got a lot of color symbols in the book so far, and you're going to see it in every chapter. We've got the green with the green light in chapter 1, and Daisy in white. And now we're seeing the color gray. It's everywhere. So if you didn't highlight that in your book, go back and highlight the color gray. And think about what gray means. Gray means like void of color, death, coldness, okay? So we've got this description of the Valley of Ashes. What is it? So it's the industrial section that separates West Egg and East Egg from Manhattan, from the city. It's covered in ashes and soot from all the factories, and Nick has to travel on the train through the Valley of Ashes to get into Manhattan, to get in the city, okay? So what could it be symbolically? This is a wasteland. We find out that the Wilsons, okay, so Myrtle Wilson, Tom's mistress, and her husband George, who own a repair shop, a mechanic shop, and they live above it. Where'd it go? Okay, we find out that they live in there. Okay, so I want you to write down in your notes or in your book that the Valley of Ashes symbolizes sin, okay, because it's where Tom picks up Myrtle to take her into town so they can have their, rendezvous together. The color gray symbolizes the moral ambiguity, meaning unclearness of right and wrong. So all this sin, I'm going to kind of give you a sneak peek. A ton of sin happens in the Valley of Ashes: death, cheating, immoral behavior. Okay, so we meet the Wilsons. Let's compare George. He's like this, typical upper lower class worker. Just think covered in dirt all the time, overalls, hat. Compare him to Tom Buchanan. George is poor. He's a shadow of a man. His wife is cheating on him, Myrtle, because she thinks Tom is her ticket to getting rich, okay? She doesn't want to be with some repair mechanic. She wants to be with a gazillionaire, okay? He's kind of a ditzy guy. He doesn't even know his wife's cheating on him. Tom, we know, is wealthy and powerful. He makes a fool of Wilson right in front of his face. Now let's talk about Myrtle and Daisy. And if we're talking from a literary sense, these characters are foils of each other. So you might want to make a note in your book, foils of each other. And so is Myrtle and Daisy. They're opposites, but they reveal traits about each other in a similar way. So Myrtle, look at her. She's this like sexy, curvaceous redhead, beautiful, big chested, flashy woman, okay? And then we've got this beautiful, thin Daisy. She's frail, like dainty, elegant, blonde. So Myrtle oozes sexuality. Daisy doesn't. Um, and Daisy, unlike George, is fully aware of her husband's affair, but she can't do anything about it. Where's she gonna go? I mean, this is 1920s. She can't leave him. I mean, her family has money, but just didn't do that back then. He kind of just sucked it up and dealt with it. Okay. How do we know Myrtle is not an intellectual? It's the way she talks. Okay. If you rent the film, you're gonna see she's got this like New York accent, and she says words like "I don't suppose you gotta," and she's reading gossip magazines. So she's not this eloquent, deep thinker like the Buchanans are, and how they like to speak that way. Okay, she's not classy at all. Okay. Notice how often, in what context, Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's sign is mentioned. Okay, if you look on page, where's the sign? It's somewhere in here. 26, page 26. Okay, I believe it starts there. Star, star, star the heck out of this sign every time you see it, okay? It is a hugely symbolic sign about these eyes. It's an old billboard for an oculist, so think an eye doctor, in the middle of the Valley of Ashes. It's pretty beaten up. Think about these eyes watching over all of these characters' actions and their sin, okay? That's what it represents symbolically, okay? So Tom and Nick go into town, and Nick is observing all of this affair that Tom has with Myrtle. And while they're in the car together, they see a man selling puppies on the side of the street. So what is up with this? What does this mean? Myrtle's like, "Oh, Tom, you're my sweetie. Get me a puppy for the apartment that we have together." Right? Okay. It's this sense of, with the rich, they just have money that they can just, spend and throw out whenever they want to do it. And they don't think about consequences. You guys, buying a dog is like having a child. You have to raise it and train it and feed it and take care of it. And it symbolizes that if the rich want something or want to do something, they just have to pay for it and there's no consequence. And they don't think through what's going to happen. Who's going to be in this apartment taking care of this dog if it's just their apartment so they can kiss each other? Okay, you know what I'm saying? So think about that way. And then lastly, do you think Tom will leave Daisy for Myrtle? Support your answer. Never. Okay. I mean, I hate to say it this way, but Daisy's just his side chick. Okay. Tom will never leave Daisy. At the end of the chapter, they get rip roaring drunk, right? And they're having a fight, and Myrtle says, "Daisy, Daisy, Daisy, when are you gonna leave her? I'll say her name whenever I want." And he hauls off and hits her and breaks Myrtle's nose. And so we know that she's beneath him in his social class. He's gonna have an affair with her, but he's never gonna marry her. Okay, she's just a physical commodity to him. He knows that this would be front page news of the paper because he's in the news. He's that important enough. So he tolerates her so the affair can continue. Okay, and I hope that makes sense. So a lot of corruption in this chapter, which makes sense because it starts off with the Valley of Ashes. Couple other characters that are in here. Catherine, that's Myrtle's sister. She's also trashy. The McKees, he's a photographer. So all of these people come together and they think about like penthouse suite. They're in the top of the apartment complex that Tom rents for his parties and affair. And they're all partying, getting rip roaring drunk in the middle of the day. And at the end of the chapter, it gets really weird. Because they're all drunk. And the next day, uh, at the end of the chapter, Nick and that Mr. McKee are like in bed together in their underwear looking at Mr. McKee's artwork. So if you want to break this down on a deeper literary level, it's weird because some people look at it through a lens and they analyze Nick and they think, could Nick possibly be gay? Did he have some kind of gay encounter with Mr. McKee because they're in their underwear in bed? We don't have enough details. Who knows? But at the end of the chapter on page 38, the only thing Nick can remember, because he's only been drunk like once in his life, he ends up waking up at the train station waiting for the 4 o'clock train. I'm assuming 4 a.m. Okay, so you need to, after reading chapter 2, realize that in Tom's apartment there was this huge party. Everybody got rip roaring drunk, and by the end of the chapter we have this kind of question about Nick's sexuality. It's very discreet, something we can dive into later. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I know I've been talking forever. I don't even know how long I've been talking, but I would go back through the chapter, highlight any colors, any new characters that you meet, look at your diddles bookmark. Where are we seeing word choices, diction? Where are we seeing imagery with figurative language, similes, metaphors? I saw on your exit ticket that you're struggling with his style, which it is difficult. Okay. Uh, Syntax, sentence structure, comment on that, how Fitzgerald elaborates or how his sentence structures change. And I think that's it for diddles. Okay. Again, reach out to me if you need help. Hopefully that review was helpful, and good luck with chapter 3. I'll try to check back in with you and do another review this week and get some feedback from you on your reading. Thanks, folks.